No microphone. Hi, James. Welcome. I saw that. No sound. I had my microphone turned off. Today, as every Monday night, we are going to talk about AI, but from a different perspective today. AI is changing very quickly. And with those changes come changes in legislation, or at least they're trying to legislate around AI. And I did a little research to try and find out what is going on around the world. And then I took a closer look at the AI Act from EU, because they have been very active lately. So I made a little presentation here. Let's see, so you can read it. You don't need to see me right now. So I would read this part of the text to you. The regulation of artificial intelligence, AI, is an emerging issue globally. The European Union, the United States, and China have different approaches to AI regulation. No surprise there. The EU focuses on a rights-driven approach. The US is market-driven, and China has a state-driven approach. Regulatory frameworks are being developed to manage the risk and encourage the responsible use of AI. Soft law and hard law proposals exist, and there are challenges in keeping up with the rapidly evolving technology. Various international bodies like the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence and the OECD are also involving in setting guidelines and principles for AI. So that was a little backdrop. I have then looked at a couple of different countries here to get an idea of what is going on. And we start with the United States. We have no federal guidelines yet, but no comprehensive federal law, but several bills are proposed. Nothing has been regulated yet. When it comes to the states, some states have specific regulations mainly focused on autonomous vehicles and facial recognitions. And then at the bottom, we have what agencies in the country are working on this. When it comes to EU, they have their AI regulation proposal, which aims to create a legal framework for trustworthy AI. And we will take a look at that a little later on. They're talking about data protection, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which has implications for AI. And it's the European Commission and national data protection agencies that are working on this. China, on the other hand, they have a national AI plan, comprehensive strategy, but not a legislative framework. And they are focused on personal information and protection law that affects AI. United Kingdom have their AI Council. It's an advisory body, no legislative power. And they have the Data Protection Act from 2018 that somewhat affects the use of AI. Canada has the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, which focuses on research and development. It's governed by Personal Information Protection and Electronic Document Act. In India, we have a drafted AI policy that focuses on ethics and data protection. And it's personal data that's protected. Personal Data Protection Bill is under consideration. In Australia, we have an AI ethics framework, which has guidelines for the use of AI, no legislation. And it's governed by the Privacy Act from 1988. In Japan, the focus is on the social implementation of AI, and it's governed by the Act on the Protection of Personal Information. And in Russia, we have a national AI strategy that's launched in 2019 and focus on development. And they also have some federal law on personal data. And Brazil have an AI strategy under development. And they have rules similar to the GDPR for personal data protection. And now I lost my mouse. Here it is. So some thoughts about all this. When it comes to global governance, how effective can a global governance board be in regulating AI development across different countries? Because what we saw was we have very different priorities in different parts of the world. We have ethical considerations with AI impacting multiple sectors like healthcare, law enforcement, and finance. How can ethical considerations be uninformedly applied? And then we have the question about the rapid evolution versus regulation. Given the fast pace of AI development, how can regulatory frameworks adapt quickly enough to mitigate risks without stifling innovations? So those are some of the questions that I found very interesting. And as I said, we are going to look a little bit more in detail on the European Union's aim to regulate artificial intelligence. And this will tell us a little bit more about what can happen. So let me share this document with you. Let's make it a little bigger again so you can see. The European Union aims to regulate artificial intelligence to foster its responsible development and application. This proposal came in April 2021, but they have lately started working more actively on them. And I have at the end here a link, and I think I have it in the description too, if you want to see the full article where I found this on EU's website. They have some key points. Key point number 1 is they want to do a risk classification. And they want to categorize AI systems based on their risk level. And they have 4 different categories here. Unacceptable risk, and that could be a voice-activated toy that encourages dangerous behavior in children. And that would be banned from the market. It's interesting to think about what else could be considered an unacceptable risk. Then we have high risk category. And we have a couple of examples here that could be an AI system used in a medical device for diagnosing diseases. And for that, it would be a rigorous pre-market assessment and continuous monitoring. Example 2 is AI in law enforcement for predictive policing. AI in that case would be, the regulation would be that they must be registered in an EU database and undergo regular audits. Then they have a separate section about generative AI, and that is all the tools we love to play with, like ChatGPT or the create image from text and all of these tools, generative AI. Example here is ChatGPT or similar text generating models. They must disclose that the content is AI generated and avoid generating illegal content. So this would mean that if you use an AI like this and you are part of EU, that you have to disclose that this is AI generated. A blog post, something you write, everything created with generative AI, you have to disclose that that's what it's coming from. And then you have limited risk. And here an example is a deep fake generator for creating altered videos. And again, you must inform users that they are interacting with AI generated content. And here I have a big question. We know how deepfakes can destroy a person. And I'm a little bit worried if that should be limited risk when we think about social media in particular. Then they have a section here where they talk about the priorities. And they emphasize that AI systems should be safe, transparent, traceable, non-discriminatory, and environmental friendly. Human oversight is encouraged to prevent harmful outcomes. So, who James agree with me about the generative, the deep fakes there. Yeah, I thought that was a little strange. So then I started to say, okay, human oversight. What do they mean by that? Who should perform human oversight? And they said qualified professionals, individuals with expertise in the domain where the AI system is being used. For example, medical professionals for healthcare AI systems. Ethics committees, groups specializing in ethical considerations related to AI technology. Regulatory bodies, government and or industry-specific organizations. And then I wondered, where should this occur, the human oversight? It should be in the developmental phase of an AI, in the deployment phase, post-deployment. That means continuous monitoring after the system has been deployed. Then they have a section about unacceptable risk, systems that pose threats to people, such as those that manipulate behavior or classify people based on socioeconomic status, will be banned. I don't know that they really consider the impact deepfakes can have. Also, how are we to know if it's a fake or not? Well, as they said, you have to disclose that this is made by AI. With a massive amount of content posted daily, it would be impossible to police it all. Yeah, absolutely. And this, such as those that manipulate behavior, would be banned. Well, deepfakes, aren't they manipulating behaviors? It's so many questions to this document, and that's why it was interesting to go through it. And who will be responsible for the banning? That would be the regulatory bodies, the governments in different EU states, the European Commission, and national governments. And they will have some enforcement mechanism. High-risk AI systems must undergo rigorous evaluation before entering the market. Failure to pass this assessment could result in a ban. They will have something called regular audits. Systems that are already in use will be subjected to periodic checks. Non-compliance discovered during these audits could lead to a ban. And then we will have whistleblowers and public reports that can trigger investigations that may result in a ban. For the high risk ones, and that was, let me scroll up. High risk was, for example, used in a medical device for diagnosis or law enforcement. And it's about the same. System affecting safety or fundamental rights will be assessed before market entry and throughout their life cycle. These include AI in medical devices, law enforcement, and more, if I just have kept on reading. And it's about the same here with national government, European Commission, regulatory bodies, all the same. When it comes to the generative AI models like ChatGPT, they must comply with transparency requirements, including disclosing that the content was generated by AI. And the key regulations here is the transparency requirement. Generative AI models like ChatGPT must disclose that the content they generate is AI created. This is to ensure that users are aware that they are interacting with machine-generated content. But if I go to ChatGPT and ask them to create content for me, am I then responsible to disclose that this was AI created? It's a little bit gray there. Who is responsible? ChatGPT has to tell me that it's AI created, but what's my responsibility? Then they have content restrictions. The AI model must be designed in a way that prevents it from generating illegal or harmful content. This could include hate speech, disinformation, or content that incites violence. Okay, I can see why they have this here, but how are we going to make sure if the AI access the web, we know that this exists out there? Should we have filters within the AI that eliminates all that information when they are searching the web? And then we have copyright compliance. Generative AI must also publish summaries of copyrighted data used for training. This is to ensure that AI systems respect intellectual property rights. And this, I believe, we have had instances, at least here in the US, where authors have sued ChatGPT because they claim that ChatGPT are trained on their full body of work without permission or without consent from the authors, and these books are copyright protected. So I believe that this can have something to do with that authors, because they talk about the training, copyrighted data used for training. The disclosure that content is AI generated could be implemented through a visible label or notification in the user interface where the content appears. Like they have a banner that says this content is AI created. And here we have it, filters. Read on, Pia. Algorithm could be used to scan and filter out content that violates legal or ethical standards. And then summaries of copyrighted data could be made publicly, I can't talk, available, perhaps in a database or as a part of the AI system's documentations. So you should be able somewhere to find what copyrighted materials they are trained on. And then we have this part of limited risks. And that's where I was confused, because that was the deepfake, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go up again and make sure. Example, a deepfake generator for creating altered videos was their example. So let me see what they actually say here. Limited risk. These AI systems must meet minimal transparency requirement, allowing users to make informed decisions. That's all they said. That's all they said about the deepfakes. And I am surprised. As I said, this is the very first document, and I will show you where I got the article. It's right here. This is the article, and it's from 14/06/2023 was the latest update of this. And this is a summary of the things I just talked about. But then we have several links here if you really want to look into this. And here is the renegotiated thing about this AI Act, and all of this is super interesting in my eyes. So far, I have just enjoyed using the different generative AI and used AI in other forms, but we all know that sooner or later, the legislation have to catch up and somehow regulate the use of AI. This was my introduction to questions about legislation. I will put my link here in the chat if anybody wants to come in and discuss this. I think it's important that, especially us that use AI a lot and that are positive to AI, us that see possibilities but still are aware of the risks, which I have discussed in different forums, that we are keeping an eye on what's happening with regulation. And the reason I focused on the EU's AI approach is that we know that what happens in EU can have big effects on what happens here and the rest of the world. We know that, for example, the iPhone 15 that just came out now have a USB-C. And that is because EU regulated that all personal electronics has to have a C port, USB-C port. And that made Apple take the step to even create a C port for their new iPhone. If EU will be the first body that creates legislation around AI, it will affect how the rest of us, the rest of the world. Hi, James.
Hello, Pia.
It will affect us, and it will.
It's already affecting us. We just don't realize
Yeah.
it. I mean, you're seeing, I'm spending a lot of time on YouTube Shorts and on TikToks. There's a ton of AI generated content already being posted on these platforms every day. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of videos a day. So it's already out there, and because I'm probably, a little bit more aware of AI than some people, I've seen some videos out there that some people are actually believing in, that I took one look at them and like, yeah, that's an AI generated video. But part of it's because, when we're involved in the creation side, we see details that other people don't see.
Yeah.
And these government officials aren't going to be able to just look at a video and know it's AI generated. So that's where my
But
concern is how are they gonna even police that? They would have to have a manual review of every piece of content posted online, and that would be almost an impossible task.
but the thing is that what I'm worried about is that these people that create the legislation are not informed enough.
Every time. I mean,
And
this is the same thing we
what,
had with the COPA Act just a couple of years ago. The people
but what
making
will
those
happen?
legislative decisions have no clue what they're talking about, and when the people that do know what they're talking about try to talk to them about it, they shut them down. They won't even listen to the people that actually know what they're talking about.
But what I'm afraid will happen is that they create a legislation. And what worried me when I looked at this was the difference between ChatGPT generated, where it says over and over, you have to disclose, you have to disclose. And then you see in their example deepfakes. And I just, are they
You have to
serious?
disclose. But here's the thing. People are going to but making a law that you says you have to disclose are only going to affect the people that don't intend to create harm with what they're doing. The people that are intentionally doing it to create harm don't care about your disclosure legality.
No, but what I'm afraid for is that the legislative bodies that make these rules don't know enough to make good rules, number one.
Hmm.
Number two, they will not be the ones, they will lay the responsibility on places like YouTube.
Hmm. They're going to
And
lay
then
it
they
up to
will
the platforms.
fine, and then they will fine YouTube for not following these legislations.
And it's gonna
And
be something they're gonna be just like, there's no way we can police it either. So what do we do? I mean, and it's
yeah,
the
but
same thing like what happened with Copa. A lot of innocent people that I mean, Copa was, I think, had a good intention. The Child Online Protection
mhm,
Act that came out a few years ago. But I know a ton of channels because you and I both been in the YouTube space a while. I know a ton of channels personally that lost their entire business because of Copa.
mhm,
And it hurt more good people, but a lot of the predators and the people it was supposed to stop didn't even slow them down. They're still
no.
out there doing the same predatory stuff right now.
And this can be a good parallel to what is gonna happen with this. YouTube might have to make changes in the rules for what you can use. If you can use AI in any means for your content, or if they have to do like they did with Copa, and then a lot of creators will end up with the short stick because
Hmm.
uh,
Well, you
YouTube
know,
can't afford to be penalized from the legislative community. They can't. I mean, I
well,
understand that.
and when you have a worldwide internet and every country is creating their own rules and
Mm-hmm.
regulations, the we can't control what happens in every single country in the world.
No.
And I mean, this is why I would never want to run a big platform like YouTube or Facebook or
Oh, no.
Twitter. I mean, I would be just ripping my hair out with some of the struggles that they have to go through trying to keep everything legal with all the different regulations and things that different countries are trying to do, and what countries can we be seen in? Do we just turn off certain countries just because we don't want to mess with their regulations?
Yeah. And
It has to be a nightmare job. I would never want to run that big of a platform. But at the
all of
same
that
time,
will
these
all of that
regulators,
will be affected by AI regulation as well.
oh yeah. I mean, even small channels, small platforms.
Yeah.
I mean, bloggers. I run blogs. I'm working on restarting some of my own websites, and I can already see how some of this AI stuff is going to affect how we do our own, even small websites.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's
Absolutely.
tools. The other thing is, what are they using to define AI? Because I've been using plugins and tools on my WordPress websites for years that are AI driven tools.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And they're getting better and better and better. But now they're getting to a point where they're going to start regulating AI use. How is that going to affect these other things that go behind the scenes that nobody ever really sees, nobody knows about, but it's going to actually
Things
affect some
like
of that stuff.
automation. Yeah,
Hmm.
automation. How hard they, but I mean, there are several reasons why I wanted to talk about this today, because we are all right now in a phase where we enjoy what we can do with AI.
Hmm.
Automation, creatively, all of these AI tools that all of a sudden is available. And we are all just happy right now.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, there is a lot going on that we don't talk about.
Well, and
And
it's kind of the AI is kind of like the wild, wild west of the internet right now.
yeah,
And that's the thing is it's so new and it's so early in the development they don't know how to regulate it. They're trying to figure
hmm,
out how to regulate it, which I applaud the fact that they're trying to figure it out, but often the people making those decisions don't know what to do to regulate it because they don't know what they're doing.
no, they are. And that's why it's important that all of us that know something, little things, everybody are part of the debate before it's too late. Because that's what I feel happened with Kappa when that happened. There wasn't really a good debate about the problem
Yeah.
before
It
the
came up and
politicians created their law, and then it
well
became a
they
mess.
created a mess of a law
Yeah?
that's having it's hurt more innocent people than the actual people it was supposedly designed to hurt. And the thing is, I've always said this is why held the stance that I've had on gun regulation and all kinds of issues too. Is it's only going to hurt the people who are willing to follow the rules anyway. The
Mm-hmm.
people that are bent on finding a way around the rules. I mean, there are things that have been illegal for years that people are doing every day online still. Um, And there's been rules against some of these things, and I've seen some of these really horrible practices that people are teaching are valid marketing practices that have been, you know, against the rules for years, and people are still teaching them as valid ways to do things.
But we have a chance to start a discussion about how should AI be regulated. And
Yeah,
I mean, I searched on YouTube for videos about AI regulation when I prepared for tonight. And there isn't much out there. I can find millions of
because it's not
videos
mainstream
about.
yet, so people aren't doing content on it. Honestly,
No,
I think a lot of those discussions are happening behind closed doors, but because it's not mainstream frontline attention right now, people aren't doing content because most people right now doing content are going for what's getting the most attention right now mainstream so we can get as many views as possible on it.
but
And
the same on the web. If you search for AI regulation, you end up on websites like EU's website. But if we don't get the debate started now, we will face the fact that, okay, regulation is here. And now, what do we do?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
only
Then
chance we
then it'll
have
just be
to.
everybody crying about it, and then everybody's gonna be putting videos out about it because it's gonna be something
Mhm.
to complain about. That's gonna get a lot of attention. But by then it's too late.
Yep. So I think it's important that we start a debate on. I mean, we must find some
Yeah, we
type of regulation. I
Oh,
mean,
I agree. I think regulation is going to absolutely have to happen. I I mean, I have no idea on really how to regulate it. I don't know how we could, and it's not so much, should we regulate it? Yes. How are they going to enforce the regulations? That's
mhm.
that's the core problem. And that's like what been one of the biggest problems with a lot of the regulations they've already done on online stuff is it's every time they try
And,
to come up with a system to enforce it, it hurts more of the innocent people than it does the people that they're actually targeting doing something against. And I don't want to see the innocent people hurt because of too stricter regulations too soon. If that makes sense.
and it also is important, I believe, that we put the right people in whatever organization how you want to organize this when we're writing these laws, the
Hmm.
people that actually know, because I was very scared when I read the EU paper that they were so light-handed on deep fakes.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
that was kind of a
I mean,
shocker to
yeah,
me, honestly, because that
whoa.
I thought that would be at the top of the list, especially
I
with
mean,
them
I
already. I mean, I've already seen, and granted, being kind of aware enough to be able to notice, I've been able to at least pick it out. I think most people probably could, maybe because they were not well done. But I've seen some deep fakes of well-known political figures already being posted.
I mean,
Um,
I can go online now and take one of my deep fakes and do a face swap on a video with the help of AI,
mhm.
and nobody would notice if
You
I
can do
choose the
voice
right
changes.
video.
I mean, they can
Yeah,
voice change to a celebrity's voice. They can put that celebrity's face on it, and they can do it right now. And some of
yeah.
them are really bad and easy to pick apart, but I've seen some that I had to watch it 2 or 3 times to figure out if it was a fake or not.
Yep. And I mean, the EU documents went very light-handed on deepfakes. They even used the word deepfake as an example. And that
Yeah,
was
I
a little
saw that,
scary.
and I was
That shows me that they don't really understand. They are so worried about, okay, personal information, privacy, those bits. But all that can be ruined with the good, well done deepfake.
yep,
It doesn't matter if you protect my name, my address, my income, all of that. If my reputation as an individual gets destroyed.
because you put that deep fake video out there, and then before it comes out that it was a deep fake, millions of people have blown it up and it's gone viral, and now somebody's entire reputation is trashed because of a
Hmm.
fake video. And,
And you can
and
never take that back. You can
nope.
never reverse that
Even
effect.
even even once they prove that it was a fake, the damage once done is done, and then there's going to be all kinds of people that deny that it was a fake. That
Yeah,
all the people,
it
oh
will
no, that
never
was just a
change
conspiracy
people's.
theory, and it wasn't really a
Yep,
fake,
that will
and it's
never
already
change
happening. It
people's
just
opinion.
hasn't hit any of. It's going to take it happening to a probably a well-known political figure like a president, a government leader of some kind, getting one of those done on them and absolutely trash their reputation, and then it come out that it was a deep fake for them to realize the impact deepfakes can have.
But I'm also a little bit worried about this. Okay, they had all these examples of AI that could be banned, or not all, but a few.
Hmm.
And I'm a little worried that who is going to make the final decision if a document is going to be banned? I mean,
Yeah.
it's very loosely written. Okay, this wasn't the legal text I read, because that is, but I mean, they had this, what did they call it? Not
Well,
high
that's kind of
risk.
where I
What?
started. Where I was is even if they do come up with a regulation, how are they going to enforce it? Who's going to enforce it? How can we trust the people that are enforcing it not to take advantage of their position?
They called it
Because I mean, we already see that we can't trust people in certain positions with positions that they have.
they called it unacceptable risk. And I mean, who who is deciding what is an
I mean,
unacceptable risk?
yeah.
For me, when I hear the word deepfake, I think unacceptable.
Well, yeah. I
That's
mean,
what goes on in my head. But obviously not in EU, because
but again, it's like we started out. I don't think the people making these policies understand the impact it's going to have. That's what I said in my comment, and I got to stand by that. I don't think that the people making these policies understand the impact of what a deep fake can do to somebody's entire life, and to, I mean, you get enough fanatical followers following a certain person, and then you put out a video that's a deep fake of that person telling them to go and harm people. And guess
mhm.
what? Somebody's going to go out and cause harm to other people. And then it doesn't matter if it was a fake or not. That is out there, and it's going to be pointing the fingers right back at the person that the fake was about.
But I think it's worse than that. Not just that they don't understand what impact. I don't think these people know enough about AI in general.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
how
they
are
don't.
they going to regulate?
Probably all they know is that there's this thing called Chat GPT that can create information. They probably don't know as much about AI as we do. And I've barely scratched the surface of understanding AI. And I guarantee you, I know more than most of these government officials that are trying to make policies about it.
Absolutely. So that's where we have to start the debate. How are they going to collect people to, because I don't know how EU does things, but I know in Sweden, when I lived there, when they are changing something important, for example, they have this, what did they call, specialist group. They set put people together in a group that is like a think think tank.
A think tank,
No, a think tank.
mastermind type.
Yeah, something like that. I know when they changed the grading systems in elementary school,
Hmm.
I was part of one of the groups that talked about should we have grading for behavior and conduct, because back in the days 100 years ago, that was a grade in the Swedish elementary schools. You, you
It
got
wasn't a
graded on
hundred years ago. You're
behavior
not
and
old.
conduct. And I was part of a group. We were maybe, in my little group, we were maybe 25 people that
Hmm.
met regularly
Hmm.
as a group that the legislature could come with question on that. And that was just that one little part. And then they have similar groups for all part of the legislation before they even write the text.
Hmm.
And that's what you need to do with everything. These legislator needs to get people together that, first of all, that understand all forms of AI, scientists, computer people, all of this, but also regular users
Yeah. They
to
need
have.
developers and creators of the AI involved, but they need everyday users, content creators, people that are out here using these tools and can actually discuss how they actually work in practical application.
And if we let them continue without screaming and saying, do you know what you're doing? Before you create any legislation, you have to figure this out. Otherwise, we will have a new CAPA.
Hmm.
And just from reading this in EU, I haven't seen any. It's so hard when it comes to US because we have state legislation and then we have federal. And nobody has come out with a document like this, like EU did. But I mean, it's scary that they, from what I understood from these articles on their website, they, the little I know about AI, and I have mostly focused on generative AI because that's where the fun is. But I
Hmm.
mean, I have played around with automation and things like that too. And the little I know about AI, still with that little knowledge, it said to me when I read all this that they don't know what they're talking about. And that scares me. That
Yeah.
really scares me.
Every time any kind of that's the thing is anytime any kind of legislation for the internet has come up, that's been a problem.
Hmm.
And it's not just the internet either. I've seen it because, I'm not an expert because, I'm just
Everything
a
tech.
layman, but every time legislation for medical stuff comes up, they do the same thing. It's not just, because they don't understand the internet.
No.
Medical stuff comes up. And if you listen to some of the debates on some of the medical issues that have been up for different legislative issues, you can tell that half the people that are trying to make these policies do not understand and refuse, flat out refuse to listen to anybody that tries to talk to them that does understand what they're trying to legislate. They've decided what they want, and all they're here to do is to make it happen, whether it would cause harm or not. They don't care about the harm it's going to cause to people. They don't care about the people that they're going to save. They care about getting their name on that bill.
So, really, what we're talking about is a bigger problem, and that is the problem how our legislative or government groups, how they create new legislation. What the.
Well, that's part of the problem with the way our I don't know how EU is, and I know a lot of this is around the legislation being tossed in the EU. I have no knowledge of EU politics and how their systems work. I know in our country, unfortunately, money is what's making the
Mhm.
policies. It's who's paying them, which lobbyist is paying them to put forth what bill and what that bill says. Unfortunately, that's what decides most political stuff and most bills and most laws passed in this country is who's paying them. And it's not the taxpayers that are paying them, it's the corporations, it's the
Yeah.
lobbyists, it's all the people that have deep pockets and uh, no morals or ethics.
But the thing is, since EU seems to be pushing this pretty hard right now, and they have debates and they are really, it will affect us. We can't say, oh, that's EU. We know that it's EU, but it will affect us no matter what they finally come up with. Even if it's a different system, it
Yeah.
will have deep
Oh yeah, it's gonna
impact
have
on
an
how
impact.
our regulation will be. And
Yeah.
it will
Oh,
have deep impact on these AI systems because they have to adjust to what just happened in EU.
hmm
And they're not going to do two different systems.
no.
So,
Well, I agree with that, and yeah, I don't know where the answers lie because I don't get involved in politics very much, and I don't talk about politics most because all it does is frustrate me because I think all politicians are crooks anyway.
yeah, I am not very active in politics either, but with this I got so it worried me, and that's why I thought, God, I must talk about this. I
Yeah,
must talk about this
it's something
because
that
right now,
definitely is important to discuss. I hope that people with loud enough and better voices than mine can articulate what needs to happen to people that are in
mhm,
power. Um, Unfortunately, I have a feeling that all the screaming about it and all the talking about it we do will just fall on deaf ears, because they're going to go by who's putting money in their pockets, not word in their ears. Um,
probably, yeah, but that was also interesting. Uh, that
and how many of
let
them
me
are
see if I,
invested in these AI companies, so their regulations are going to benefit what's going into their pocket from these companies.
let me see
That's
here
why we
what.
need to take money and investing and all that stuff out of politics. And I know they proposed a bill last week, I think, or a week before last, that's supposed to put some of those limits on Congress. And I don't think it's got a chance in hell of passing, even though supposedly it has bipartisan support. I don't think it has a chance of passing, but it's something that needs to happen. And I know a lot of people that think it needs to happen. Because I mean, I can tell you right now that there's politicians, and I know because I look at some of this kind of stuff because of my financial stuff that I work on. There's politicians right now that are investing heavily into some of these AI development companies. They're not going to put regulations that are going to take money out of their pocket.
But this was very interesting to me here. The EU focuses on rights-driven approach.
hmm
US is a market-driven and China is a state-driven approach.
hmm
That means that whichever of these three bodies get their legislation completed first will somewhat force the others to follow in line.
Mm, I don't know that it'll
Because
force to follow the same type of legislation, but
if EU works as it seems like they are working right now, this will, within this
well, I gotta
session,
say, out of the three options, and based on what you described in your uh, presentation, I like the EU's approach best out of the three. I just don't know how they're going to enforce it and how they're going to regulate it and how it's going to be viable.
if I understand EU correct, I might be mistaken because they just Sweden just joined EU about the time I left and moved over here. But I have a friend that I'm still talking to, and she was a representative for Sweden in EU. And when it comes to these big, big decisions they make, like educational exchange that all members in EU can go to school in any EU country, or AI legislation, or money legislation. If I understand it right, they make a decision in EU This is the AI, what did they call it? AI Act. The Parliament in EU vote and they accept it when the text is finally there. Then it goes to each member country that has to approve it. And it depends on what type of legislation it is. In some cases, they just need simple majority, 51%. In some cases, and I don't know which case the AI legislation is, in some cases, all the member countries' parliaments have to approve it. So I
Yeah.
don't know in this case. But I know when Britain wanted to leave EU, all the other member countries had to approve it before the Brexit agreement. That was one example where all countries have to approve it. So I
Hmm.
don't know when it comes to this type of legislation. But if
Yeah.
it goes through, then each country has to write their own laws following what this regulation stipulates.
Right.
So,
I mean, that kind of makes sense because they're still independent countries, so they all have to still, have their own regulations that fall within the lines of what the EU decided.
mm-hmm,
Um, but again, I don't understand enough about EU politics and how they run all that stuff. I have enough trouble keeping up with what's going on here,
yeah.
and I'm not all that great at staying up to date on our own politics. Um, but I do like their approach, as in the idea of thinking of the rights and the privacy of users and people that could be affected by AI more than how's it going to line people's pockets, which is the market driven decision, and more than what is it the state
China's
and how's
state
the
control, yeah.
state control, which is basically their stance on everything is how the state can control it. um
But
but
another interesting point of view when you look at AI is that they talk about the basis for all of this is their risk classification. So it's all about risk. I didn't see much about possibilities.
uh-huh
So it's unacceptable risk, high risk, limited risk, and then generative AI then.
yeah, there's a
But it's
lot of
all about risk.
well,
And
and that was some
that,
kind of nebulous wording in the way it was worded, I think. And how do you
but
judge
that
that risk?
but that shows a little bit about how these politicians think about AI.
Uh-huh.
They chose to categorize all of it as level of risk.
Right.
I mean, it might be nothing, but for me, the choice of describing it that way says something about their attitude towards AI. If you choose to call everything a risk on some level in your text, that shows what you really think about it.
Yeah. It's all about.
So,
But
I
and how
don't
much
know.
of that is fear mongering? Because there's a lot of fear mongering going on about AI. You know, honestly, most people's entire knowledge base of AI is what they've seen in movies over the last 30 years, and movies have
Mm-hmm.
not looked favorably on AI for the most part. So you have to take that into account. There's a lot of people that all they know is what they're being told to believe by other people that don't know anything about AI themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens.
Absolutely.
I mean, that happens on almost every political issue that happens. There's a lot of people that are sharing opinions that have not done any research, have zero experience in what they're talking about. Um, and that's one of the things that has been so frustrating for me with my situation on a lot of hot button issues in our country right now, because there's a lot of hot button issues that AI is just one of them coming up, that a lot of the people that are talking about how evil these things are people that do not understand at all what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But because they have a platform, because they have an audience, because people know who they are, you can't say anything bad about them. They know what they're talking about, even when they obviously don't. And and I'm when it comes to politics, I'm unaffiliated. I do not have a ideology that I follow. Um, but I have my viewpoints, and they tend to be less conservative than most people in my area, and more conservative than a lot of other people. I follow kind of in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any affiliation. I last election was the first time I was allowed to vote because I just became a citizen. I was here without citizenship for 18 years before I finally decided to become a citizen. So
Mhm.
I am not
Well,
politically active in any way. But there are questions that I have opinions about. And sometimes I guess I'm very conservative and sometimes I'm very liberal,
one of the
depending
problems
on
I
the
have,
questions.
yeah, and one of the problems is, and especially because I live in Texas, and it's a very conservative state. It's been run by the conservative party almost my entire lifetime. I think we've had one liberal governor in our state in my entire life. And the problem is that a lot of the conservative party has moved much further into levels of extremism than I can comprehend being, ethical or appropriate. We've got, and I don't care about people's religion, but I do care about the separation of church and state, and the Christian nationalists are need to get out of politics because this is not a Christian nation, and I am not a Christian person. I grew up in that faith, and I deconstructed over 30 years ago, and I'm seeing a lot of things in my own state that scare the heck out of me. My situation with my
Hmm.
daughter. Okay. 10 years ago, we had to choose whether or not we were going to go through the pregnancy. And it was the hardest decision we've ever made in our lives. We chose to go through with it. We knew the complications, we knew the risks. But at the same time, in that 10 years since, because of my involvement with that community, I've counseled people and sat with people and supported people who chose not to go through with the pregnancy, and guess what?
Hmm.
I have told people at times I wish we hadn't, because
Hmm.
our life is so freaking hard, and the sacrifices we have to make. And then, the politicians that wanna say, but in my state right now, if we were pregnant with Emily today, we wouldn't have that choice. We would
Yeah.
have to go through with the pregnancy. Even if my wife died in the process, they don't care. We could not abort the pregnancy because Emily's heart was still beating.
But you know what?
And every doctor we talked to told us to abort the pregnancy. Now they can't even do that. They cannot even suggest that
But you
in
know
this state.
what's interesting? I moved when I moved over from Sweden. I moved to New Jersey, which is Democrats through and through. I mean,
Mhm.
just like Texas is Republican. Then I moved to Florida,
Hmm.
which now is very much Republican. I mean,
Yes. And even
and
10 years ago when I lived, it's funny, when I lived in Florida 10 years ago it was pretty even. There
yeah,
was a
but
lot of
now it
conservatives, but
is,
there was also a lot of liberals. There was a lot of kind of
yeah,
back and
but
forth
now
and
it
mixture,
is
but now it's almost all
very conservative.
conservative.
But if I compare my day to day life, it's not very much that is different.
Mm,
No.
yeah.
The only thing that really is different is for brain injury. They don't have brain injury resources down here like we had in New Jersey.
Well,
I
because
don't know. I don't know if that has to do with politics or if it's more about location because
some of it's
we had
location, but some of it is
New
the
York,
conservative politics.
Philadelphia, very advanced healthcare and hospitals close
Hmm.
to us. Hello, Teach for Your Needs. I
Yeah.
didn't see you
Anyway,
come
I
in. I'm
didn't mean to
sorry.
derail the conversation. I actually had a point with where I was going. Um,
Okay.
when I brought up everything with my daughter and those issues, because the same mindset that was applied to those issues in our state is what's being applied to the conversations around AI. They ignored all the doctors and all the medical professionals that tried to tell them the dangers of what they were doing when they passed this legislation in our state and the medical complications, and that the fact that that the only abortions that were done were not all elective procedures for birth control, which is basically what the attitude of the conservative party is, that all abortion is about birth control, and it's not. There are medically necessary issues where sometimes they have no other choice to save the life of the mother, and even that is illegal in my state at this moment.
Yeah.
And there's women that are having to leave the state so they don't die and have medical procedures to save their life, and then they can't come back to the state because the way they wrote the law, if they go to another state and have the procedure done, if they come back to Texas, they will be arrested and put in prison.
Mm.
That's how
Well, let's.
extreme they have gone on this legislation. And the same people that would not listen to any medical professionals when they made these decisions are now going to be making these decisions about AI. And they're going to run the same attitude. They're not going to listen to the people that actually know what they're talking about, how this stuff works and the dangers of it. They're going to fear monger their way through and push some legislation that hurts more people than it helps. And it's going to be very
That
bad for us.
that brings up another question when it comes to legislation around AI. How much are we gonna let the states create their legislation, or do we need it to be on a federal level?
Yeah. Well, that's going to be one of the hot button issues I think that's going to come up here in the United States with that
Hmm.
is this a state issue or is this a federal issue? Um, and I think that's going to the determination of that is going to determine a lot of how the regulations go.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I'm worried that I have seen so many things since I moved here, and it's been 20 years now, that I say, I theoretically I understand that we are a United States and that the states have their own legislation for some things. But then there are things like, for example, my field, which is education.
mhm.
I have seen such humongous differences in quality of education
Mhm.
between states
Oh, yeah.
because of it's a state regulated area.
Yep. And
So
my state's one of the worst.
so I mean that's another thing. Are we going to let the states create their own regulation around AI?
Yep.
Or do we need, do we at least maybe need a federal general direction first?
I think there's going to be
And
a combination. I think there's going to be some federal regulations, and then states are going to be left to work out some of the finer details for their states. And then left to, as long as you're enforcing the minimum standards of the federal, then it's up to the states to apply more strict or less strict guidelines. Um, and I see the reason for that in our politics and in our government. I think the way our government's set up is so frustratingly confusing anyway. Um, but I think honestly, something as big as AI may be something that needs to be handled on a federal level, but I don't know that that's what's actually going to happen.
maybe does it need to, then the next question is, does that mean that it actually needs to be handled on an international level?
Yeah. Oh, that's even broader because I mean, let's face it, the internet is worldwide, and I think there needs to be. I think the only way you're going to effectively actually regulate anything on the internet is for it to be a worldwide regulatory system, but it's so massive. I just don't know how they're going to police it. How are they going to enforce it? How are they going to, stick to these? And we don't have a, worldwide governing body that effectively works. I
No,
mean, we have the United Nations, but they're
that's
kind
not
of
a
ineffective.
governing, that's
They're
not a
not a governing
governing body.
body. They're kind of, they're kind of a council that's ineffective and really doesn't do much. Uh,
Hmm. But I mean, uh, we when I did that little presentation, we already saw the difference in approach between EU, US, and China. It's a
yeah,
totally different approach, and it's a totally different end goal.
yeah. The end goals are different, but it, if we did a worldwide, if there was, say, a worldwide system that could do this, we could take elements of all three approaches and maybe find something that cohesively worked with the diversity of cultures we have around the world. Maybe. But then again,
Maybe,
maybe
but
that's why we don't have a worldwide governing body. There's so much diversity of cultures and
mhm.
understanding. I think it would be nigh on impossible. I wouldn't say completely impossible, but very, very, very difficult to create a governing body that would not create more conflict than it solves.
And at the same time, the irony of this is that with AI, we are actually shrinking the world. We are connecting people from everywhere thanks
Mhm.
to AI in many situations.
Oh yeah. I mean, AI technology is being used right now to translate languages and barriers
Hmm.
and breaking down barriers that have been existing even with the internet being as expansive as it is breaking down barriers even more at a
Hmm.
faster rate than it's ever been possible.
Absolutely.
And I think it will continue to do so. I have no idea where all it's going to go, but I think it's going to be, it's I look at AI like anything else. It's a tool, and it
Hmm.
can be used to do great harm and evil, and it can be done used to be do great good. It's how people
Absolutely.
use those tools that determine what the outcome's going to be. Um,
Absolutely.
People that are greedy and selfish and powerful and out to do harm are going to do harm with it. People that are out to help and be benevolent and be kind and be useful and use it as a way to expand that are going to be able to do that. But
And
it's
that's
not the tool's
why,
it's not the tool's fault how you use it.
but that's why it's, oops, I didn't meant to do that. Remove that. That's why it's so important that we have the people with the right knowledge to assist in writing these regulations,
Yeah.
regardless of what level it is on. If it's a country, a state, a union, if it's the world, no matter what level it is on, we need to. I'm repeating myself, but this is so important because the way this was written scared me really bad and made me think that if these people that know so little about AI don't collect knowledge and information from the people that know, and they keep on going and create this legislation that will affect everybody.
Oh yeah.
If they don't do that in a, I mean, when it's done, it's harder to do something about it.
Oh yeah.
So the only chance we have to, in any way, influence how this might be constructed is to do it before they
Before the
actually
laws get
construct it.
passed.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I agree with you. Um, I don't know how it's going to happen though. I don't know how we're
I
going to
don't know
get
either.
the people that are making those decisions to listen to the right people, to have the right people. And I don't even know who the right people are. I think it needs to be, like you said, a committee or a kind of a mastermind, a coming together of people who have created this kind of stuff, people who are the engineers behind it, people that are
Mhm.
actually day-to-day users of it, that are using it in their everyday lives, that know how it works on the front lines. That's one of the big problems I have with almost every structure in our country, from companies and corporate structures to government structures. To, they all have the same fallacy. They don't listen to their frontline people who are actually getting, one, the most harm from their decisions, and two, that are actually using the things and that are benefiting or not benefiting from the decisions they're making, and they never listen to them.
I just got an idea. I have to go in and ask ChatGPT who would be the best suited people in the world to create. Who would be the best suited people or groups in the world to come together and write legislation about the about
You.
AI. Let me see here. I misspelled some things here. Who would be the best suited people groups in the world to come together? Okay, let's see if if I even get an answer. I got an answer. Let me share it. Let's see here. Share screen. Okay. So it says AI ethicists, experts in the ethical implications of AI, data scientists, legal experts, government officials, industry leaders, civil rights advocates, consumer protection groups, international organizations, academics, general public, healthcare experts, environmental scientists, economists, cybersecurity experts, and journalists and media.
Hmm.
This is what we need.
Yep. If there's 15 people, get 4 or 5 people from each group. That's a pretty large committee.
Yeah.
Um.
But that would be a great, and make sure that you have like, say, two from each group. That's 30 people
Yep.
and represents the
And I think you need a
liberal,
good mixture of
conservative.
conservatives on that group, and make it 50-50. Each group
Yeah,
has 2 liberals and 2 conservatives from each one of those categories,
yeah.
so that you get really all the viewpoints in
No,
one place.
two groups of 30 with one liberal and one conservative, and they have to discuss the same question, so you get it from two different groups that have no connection to each other, and spread them out around the world. That that chat GPT is actually pretty smart. That's not a bad
It's,
setup.
it's not a bad setup,
And
but
us
but do
general
you think
public
that
is in
these
there too.
politicians would be intelligent enough to use the tools that they're talking about to set up the best structure for discussing this?
No, no. But it just hit me right when we were talking. Why don't we ask ChatGPT?
Oh crap!
That's, oh, did you
My camera fell down.
throw over your camera? Oh boy. Well, I think it's interesting. Interesting questions that needs to be discussed. And I guess we're going to continue. At least I felt that I had to start the discussion somehow. And I did by doing this live stream. Are you still there, James? Or did I lose you totally?
I think I'm still here. I
You're
just dropped my
still there.
camera.
Yeah. Well, I have to end this soon anyhow. It was really fun to have you up here and talk about this. It's an interesting discussion. And I'm going to leave this live stream up. I leave all my live streams up, but we will probably come back to this discussion when things start to happen more closely. At least I have spread a little awareness of what is going on in the world right now with this live stream. And next Monday, I have, as I said, right now we are all playing with and enjoying the different generative AIs. And I have been playing with creating music. I have been playing with creating websites. I have been playing around with a lot of different things. So next Monday, I will go back to the more fun side.
Oh,
You
I got a
have
visitor.
visitors.
You gotta say
Yeah.
hi. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, he can't hear you because I got my headphones on. But
Yeah. He can see me.
see, she's waving at you.
Hi. What a cute bite.
He's gonna grow up on AI.
Yeah. Really, he's. That's my next podcast. Fun you said that. My next podcast that's coming out next week. I was just talking about computer and uh gosh,
I'm
I'm getting
I'm
tired.
I'm putting
Computer
together a
and
podcast.
what the heck am I talking about? Computer and my God, the word disappeared. Oh, now I have to look. That drives me crazy. Where am I? Here, let me see. I hate when I lose words like that. Oh, computer and digital literacy. And I'm
Ooh.
talking about the different generations
Mhm.
and the differences and I focus a little bit since it is my podcast and it's called the Geeky Boomer. I'm
Mhm.
focusing a little bit on the boomers, but I have quite a lot about the differences between the different generations. And he's general generation alpha, isn't he? 2013 to present.
Mhm.
Yeah, they are the youngest and they are growing up. One of the things I'm talking about, they are growing up in a world where digital technologies are all present and they are likely to become even more digital native than generation Z.
Yep.
I mean,
See,
they
my
are really.
my stepson is Gen Z millennial, right on that cusp.
Yeah.
Um, and then he and his sister are both Generation Alpha,
Mm-hmm.
and they're growing up with technology that didn't exist when we were born, didn't even exist when we became adults.
Nope.
And so we're also having to balance that. How much do we expose them to technology? To at least for me, because my background is kind of weird, and I don't fit in with society anyway. Um, but I want my kids to grow up to know how to use technology and know how the advantages that technology gives them. I think one of the disadvantages to the millennials, the younger millennials and Gen Z, mostly because they grew up with the internet. They grew up,
Mm-hmm.
the older millennials and Gen X, which is my generation, grew up without the technology, and then we adopted the technology as it
Mm-hmm.
came out. The Gen Zs, the later millennials and Gen Zs grew up with it. They've
Yep.
had the internet since they were born. Um,
Gen Z is the first generation that is so-called native uh, digital literates.
yeah, but I started online. My internet journey started in 2000, and my stepson was born in 2001.
Well, I
So
started in the 90s.
yeah, I knew about the internet in the 90s. I didn't get online until, well, that was the late 90s. But I think I got my first uh, Yahoo account and my GeoCities, which was my very first website, was a
Yeah.
GeoCities.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think my first
And I got
website was
that in
GeoCities too.
99.
Yeah, I think my first website was GeoCities. But before that, when I started, the web was nothing really. So what we mostly used was chat rooms
Hmm.
because of the university. I mean, my first chat room experience was in the late 80s because of the universities were connected, and I was at university in Sweden and we were connected to the rest of the universities, and we had those IRC chat rooms between universities. So that's where my internet connection started, 89 or something like that, 89, 90. You talk
Yeah.
to people at other universities, but
Well, I had
then it
people
stopped.
trying to get me in the 90s. Yeah, the first time I heard of the internet was what 93, 94. That was really, really. I was in high school and I knew some people that were starting to do stuff on the internet. And I had people that were in my life telling me that that's the way the world was going to go. And I told them that they didn't know what they were talking about. It's just a fad. Yeah, I couldn't see the world going that way. And I really, even at that point, and I think it's hilarious now how dependent I am on technology right now for my day-to-day
Mhm.
life. Back then, I hated the level of technology I had. Okay, I didn't get my first cell phone until I was almost 30.
Hmm.
Uh, and and back then, just being tied to a house phone was just ridiculous to me, and I couldn't wait to get out in the woods and get away from people and technology and all the crap that we had back then. And it's only gotten worse over the years.
I
Um,
has always been, since I am a nerd, always been. I was lucky. The school I was teaching at in the mid 90s, they were well aware of what where this was going. So we had a giant tech program where they invested. We got internet connection. We got computers for all the classroom laptops. All the teachers got intensive education. I
mhm.
mean, so since the mid 90s, I've been very involved in especially tech for education because that
So,
was my focus.
well,
So,
for me, it was. I have a very weird background, and I haven't talked about this a whole lot. But in the early '90s, when I was in high school and just out of high school, I had a very good friend of mine who's still a very good friend and mentor to me today. Um, that would take me and a bunch of us out into the woods and drop us off for a week with nothing but what we had in our pockets, and we learned to survive.
mhm.
Um, and it was fun. I miss those days. But it also taught us one, it taught us, yes, some physical skills, but it also taught us to not be dependent on all this. It taught me the real what's necessary and what's a want. When you're in that kind of a real survival situation, which most people have never been in, true survival situation, you know what's necessary and what can be left behind. And that is something that has stuck with me my whole life. It's something I haven't done in years. I could probably do it, probably not as well as I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Uh, but that necessity that it taught me things about this is necessary, this is optional. This is something I like to have, and I can tell you the internet, my computer, my cell phone, my social media, I love all this stuff, and I use it every day, but I know I can survive without any of it too. I know
I,
how optional it is because I've lived without it. Not just lived without it as in growing up without it. I've been out to where, you know, fire and shelter and food were our priorities, not, what's the comfort of our bed gonna be? Or do we have a leaky roof?
that's the advantage of being a boomer because I grew up, I have like two words. I grew up before all tech. I mean, definitely before everything. But I also had the advantage of growing up every summer, every winter holiday when I was up from school. I spent on Gotland, it's a big island in Sweden, with a family that was my summer family. And they were farmers. And this was a small family farm where we slaughtered our own animals. I mean, I have grown up with all of that. When we slaughtered a pig, my job was to sit and whisk the blood as they emptied the blood out because that was used to make things. And I mean, so I have that really close to nature, down to earth childhood experience about what we need to survive. That food doesn't come from the store. It's something you actually
Mhm.
make yourself. And then my other half of my life, I entered into this super techno world in school. I had a boyfriend that was like super. We built our own computers. I mean, I was in my 30s, in the early mid 90s, mid late 90s. I built my first computer, my own computer, from parts. And I mean, so I have both. I have this really living on the countryside. If you're hungry, you have to slaughter a pig. A pig is not just a cute animal. You have to slaughter to get the food that you can put on the table, to the high tech, crazy world. So I have both with me, even though
Mhm.
I wouldn't like to live without the tech today.
Oh yeah. And see,
I
I
mean,
think we're because people see me, and I talk to people about some of the challenges that I've had with my daughter and stuff, and people are like, well, how do you keep optimistic about all this, and how do you keep to where like a lot of the reason y'all haven't seen me for a year, I just took a year away from social media.
hmm
Okay, and it wound up I didn't intend to either when I got away from it. I was like, I'm gonna take about a month's break and kind of refresh, reset, and then figure out what my plan is for my channel because I never intended to stop creating content. Uh, and it wound up just going on and on and on. Now I did get into some other things. I've been playing some video games and doing some other stuff, but I wasn't on any of my social media. I haven't been on TikTok. I hadn't been on YouTube. I hadn't been on Instagram. I hadn't been on Facebook. Um, for almost that entire year. And so I can do that without regret and without worrying about it. The downside to it is it hurts my channel growth whenever I'm starting to get momentum and then I take a year's break. Now I gotta go back and start all over again. Last few videos, I've kind of gotten like 5 or 6 people watching my videos. And the last time I went live, I think I had 2 people show up. Um, But it's because, you take that long away and then YouTube doesn't send out notifications to everybody because 'cause they're not used to seeing from you. But doing that, people have asked me a lot, when you're going through all this, how is it that you still somewhat, even though I have my down times, I have my negative times, but for the most part, I'm trying to stay in a somewhat positive attitude about it. And one of the things that helps me is that earlier experience because no matter what situation I'm in, I've still got a roof in my head. I've got food to eat. I've got some comfort in my life. So no matter what's going on, I've been in a worse position than this right now, and I survived it.
Yep,
So I can make it through this.
yep,
And that's something people today that are just growing up dependent on technology and growing up without learning those skills to survive without it are lacking. I know people right now that have never spent money that wasn't on plastic. That's just foreign. I still use
hmm
cash as much as I can, but I know people
yeah,
right now
me
who
too.
have never spent a dime of cash money. They've only ever used plastic. Do you know? Because being in financial stuff, because that's one of my many multi passions with my ADHD is personal finance, and some of the studies that we've been looking at when you use a credit card or a debit card, it activates the pleasure centers of the brain. When you use cash, it activates the pain centers of the brain.
hmm
Why do you think all these merchants want you to use a credit card? Because they still want you to activate pleasure and associate pleasure with buying their product. And that means you're going to spend more money. Whereas if you're activating the pain center, you're going to be less likely to spend as much.
Absolutely.
That's why they wanna push everything to digital and to using plastic more. So the best thing to do to combat that, to save money, use cash. I know it's hard to hear and people don't wanna hear that, especially nowadays in this digital age, and I get it. It's getting harder and harder and harder to use cash. But Credit cards and debit
You
cards
should.
activate pleasure in your brain. Cash activates
In
pain.
Sweden, they have this called, now I forget the Swedish word for it, but everybody has it and they use it to pay. There are many stores in Sweden that don't accept cash.
Hmm.
It's get more and more common in Sweden that you don't
Yep.
accept cash. People
Yeah.
have this app on their phone that they're using.
And see, everybody there, and especially this is where like the millennials who have grown up this way, the Z's that are growing up this way now, the Gen A's that are growing up this way, don't remember a time without it.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember, and I was actually watching some TikToks the other day, and I was like, I remember that kind of stuff going around. It was big news in the late 80s and early 90s when chains like McDonald's and Burger King started accepting credit cards. And even the
Mm-hmm.
people that they interviewed that worked in the store said, yeah, it's an option we're making available, but we don't really think people are ever going to use it. Look at where that was just 30
Mm-hmm.
years ago. People were
Mm-hmm.
saying, "Oh yeah, it's an option we're making available for some people, but nobody's really going to use it for just, a hamburger." Now, you can go into some of those places that won't even take cash anymore. Some of those
Yep.
places here, at least where we are, some of them won't even take cash. It's card only. Now, it's
Mm-hmm.
all, what do you mean you're going to make me swipe your card? Didn't you pay through the app?
Yep. Apps is the new thing everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Because I can put my credit card into my, because I have my Google Pay. I have my debit card connected to my Google Pay account,
Mm-hmm.
and my Google Pay account is hooked to my McDonald's app and my Whataburger app and my Sonic. I don't even have to leave the house. I can order all my food, pay
Yep.
for it before I even leave the house to go pick it up.
And you don't even have to pick it up.
Well, yeah,
DoorDash
because they charge me extra for
delivers it.
delivery. But
Yep.
last week, McDonald's had free delivery, and I did take advantage of that.
Yep.
And
Well,
I hate
a lot
McDonald's,
has
but I have
changed.
a 4-year-old. So, but I look at all these kind of tools, okay? Okay, and this kind of gets back to where we've been talking about. How is AI going to affect even that? Because this is something that we really don't know. I believe, I mean, some of those apps are already being somewhat generated by AI,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
I think AI technology is going to really flood the apps market in the coming months and coming years. And
What
I
will
think,
happen is you open your Hungry app and it knows what you have ordered from all the places and it suggests, okay, today would be a good day for you to eat this. You
mhm,
can order it here, pay with this, get it delivered by this, and it will be at your house this time. You don't
Alexa
even have to
already
ask
does
it.
that. Hey Google, hey Alexa, they already
Hmm.
do that.
Well, I don't use Hey Alexa or Hey Google.
I know, I don't either. I do not have a smart home setup. I don't have Alexa. I don't have Google. I turned off the Hey Google thing on my phone because I would be just
Hmm.
randomly talking to somebody and it would
I
start
have it
popping
turned
stuff
off
up.
on the phone, and I have I got it as a gift. One of those little Google
But I
board.
do know
But
people that use that and it does
I
that. They
have
don't
it.
even have to put in their order anymore. They just say, "Hey Alexa, order this restaurant," and it already knows their order
Mm,
and places it, pays for it, sets the delivery. Your order will arrive in 15 minutes.
yep.
Your order will be here in 25 minutes.
Yep.
I'm like, that's just crazy. You don't even have to tell them what you want. You just tell them what restaurant you want, and it places your
Mm-hmm.
order, pays for everything, and has it delivered to you.
Yep.
I
So.
mean, and that's going to become, and it's in marketing because I've studied marketing at first because I was trying to do marketing. And then as I started trying to do my own inner healing, one of the things that I realized as I do my own personal growth and my own inner healing, the number one thing you can do to financially get yourself free is to disable all the internal BS that leaves you open to marketing manipulation, because that's all marketing is manipulating your unhealed trauma inside of you to make you want to buy something. Um, and the more you heal that, the less they have an effect on you. And I've kind of gotten to a point where marketers really don't have much of an effect on me anymore. If I buy something, it's because I have done my research and I know I want it, and I deliberate on it before purchasing. I don't buy anything hardly ever on impulses anymore. But I did a lot of time in my life and wasted a lot of money buying the shiny objects, buying, courses and courses and courses that were gonna say fix all my problems and fix this problem and that problem. And I've done all that. But I started studying marketing to understand it. And then as I started understanding the psychology behind it, and the psychology behind inner healing work, and I started recognizing, hey, they're using these psychological tricks because it's triggering these
Hmm.
psychological things that I'm working on healing. Let's work on this healing, and they won't have an effect on me anymore. That was just kind of a byproduct. It wasn't an intentional thing. It was just two different things I was studying at the same time. And I found this collaboration and correlation that said, if you want to save money, one of the things you need to do is do all this healing work, because it's going to make you not feel the need to buy stuff that you can't afford with money you don't have. And, as much as people complain and say you can't live without debt, I do not have a credit card. The only debt I have in my life right now is the mortgage on my house.
I don't have a credit card.
I have no credit cards. I have nothing. I have a debit card.
Hmm.
But the
Me
thing
too.
is that it's not easy to do, because the world is going more and more towards pushing that on you. The reason why is because most and more of these businesses, the reason everybody's coming out with their own financing and their own credit cards is because they make more money from financing and from you paying interest on stuff than they do from selling you products.
Hmm.
The in a car dealership, the two most profitable parts of a car dealership is not the car lot. It's the maintenance shop and the financing office. Those are the
Hmm.
two that 90% of the profit of a car dealership is made in those two areas.
My sister-in-law bought a new car maybe 2 years ago, and she had the money to pay cash. She
Uh-huh.
bought a new Toyota, and they said you get a cheaper price if you finance it.
Yep. Most of them are doing that
So
now.
finance and pay
And
like one payment and then pay it off.
no, they're even catching wind to that. So now they're putting like a minimum financing term. So like if you
Hmm.
finance it for say 36 months, you have to pay it for at least 20 months or 24 months before you can pay it off without a penalty.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy though. Well, I need to get to bed.
AI is even starting to integrate all of that. And I mean, look at our cars. I mean, you've got the
Hmm.
smart cars now that are starting to be self-driving cars, and
Hmm.
that's going to be huge. And I don't have, I don't have some of the more modern conveniences. I'm lucky to have modern conveniences like air conditioning in my car right
And
now.
you know what? That's something that wasn't even mentioned in this EU
Mhm.
AI Act.
What about, AI in vehicles? I mean, that's a huge,
Yeah,
huge issue
they
that's
they
going on.
talked a little bit about healthcare, but self-driving cars wasn't even mentioned.
Mhm.
Well, there is a lot to discuss about this, but I really need to get to bed, James.
All right. Yeah, we kept you late.
It was very nice to have you on, and I guess this discussion will continue.
Yep, it
It's
will.
not, it's just started. You
Oh
have a
yeah, it's
good
only gonna
night.
get bigger.
Yeah, have a good night now.
You too,
And
Pia.
if Tech for Your Needs is still here, good night to you as well. And with that, this was another Monday night live stream. See you back here next Monday. Bye.